Donald Trump is pressing Texas Republicans to redistrict and redraw their congressional districts mid-decade. Let's talk about what this means and what it means for New Yorkers. Texas Republicans have launched a mid-cycle, a mid-decade redistricting process aimed at flipping 5 Democratic-controlled seats. This was a decision that Trump made because in the next congressional elections, he does not want the House of Representatives to flip back to the Democrats. That this is mid-decade makes this yet another Democratic norm that has been breached by the Republican Party. Let's talk about New York Democrats and their redistricting history over the last couple years. New York Democrats really dropped the ball on the last redistricting effort. If we rewind the clock to 2014, in New York, the Democrats and Republicans came together through a constitutional amendment that required a once per decade independent process for redistricting that bars mid-cycle map changes and takes the partisanship away from the politicians. This was part of a good government change that Democrats and some Republicans across the country really pushed for. After the 2020 census, New York lost 1 congressional seat. We went from 27 to 26 seats because of population changes. And the Independent Redistricting Commission, or the IRC, failed to agree on a congressional map. The Independent Commission was deadlocked and they didn't produce a map. The Democratic-controlled legislature instead passed its own partisan map that gerrymandered too much. The Democrats in Albany tried to ram through this partisan map. They were overly aggressive. And in April of 2022, the New York Court of Appeals rejected that gerrymandered map. People called it the Hochulmander. The court, and as a result, a court-appointed special master was appointed in order to draw an interim map until the legislature and the Independent Redistricting Commission could produce a new map. Under the court-drawn lines of 2022, Republicans flipped 3 seats. Now, it's unclear whether the new map changed those seats or political politics changed those seats, but we had George Santos, Mike Lawler, and Brandon Williams all flipping their seats towards the Republicans, leaving the New York delegation split 15 Democrats to 11 Republicans. And that swing certainly contributed to the Republicans taking back the House nationally. In December 2023, the Court of Appeals ruled that the special master was only a temporary move and that really it's on the IRC to create a permanent map for this decade. Instead, the legislature rejected the IRC maps and passed its own in February of 2024, signed by Governor Hochul, and that map shifted the 3rd, 18th, and 22nd districts more Democratic, while the 1st district tilted more towards the Republican. The 1st district is out on Suffolk County. It was immediately criticized, obviously, by Republicans as being a partisan move. And in early 2025, the New York delegation now stands at 19 Democrats, the 7 Republicans over the 26 districts that we have. In that, we have several swing districts. We have New York 3rd on Long Island, held by Tom Suozzi. We have New York 18, held by Democrat Pat Ryan. We have New York 17, 19, and 22nd. These are all swing districts in the latest elections, and the fate of these districts is really beholden to the redistricting process. The reason for all of this is that the reason why we're discussing it now is that leading Democratic states like New York, California, and Illinois are all discussing temporary retaliatory measures to counter the Donald Trump and Republican mid-decade redistricting in Texas. They want to redistrict their states in order to counter the supposed gains that Texas Republicans will face in the coming election. In New York, Democrats are seriously considering a state constitutional amendment that would permit a mid-cycle congressional redistrict that would affect a lot of these swing districts. Now, Democrats historically have believed that an independent commission is the right thing for democracy, and they're right on this. These prioritize good government norms to take the partisanship out of redistricting. But they've often not embraced their principles on this, like in New York, where they have proposed and agreed to an independent commission, but then have fought it every step of the way. Trump and Texas are fighting dirty today with this mid-decade change, and this is bad for democracy. Democrats right now are trying to uh, change their independent commission rules that they've put in place in states like California or Colorado, Michigan, Illinois, that are all reconsidering. Historically, Republicans have not played fair on this issue. Even in states that have commissions, like Ohio, they've ignored rules, delayed maps to their advantage, far more so than the Democrats have. In 2010, if we go back a decade and a half, Republicans had spent about $30 million in a Project Red Map that was an effort aimed at state legislatures to win Republican control for the 2010 redistricting process. And as a result, they gerrymandered all these maps in swing states that essentially locked in control for the Republican Party for an entire decade. And the end result has been, over the last 20 years, has been that Democrats have mostly, and unevenly, to be fair, disarmed themselves in the redistricting process in key blue states, while Republicans have weaponized the redistricting process. So the big question is, what should Democrats do today with Trump and the Republican Party in Texas changing the maps? Should the Democrats fight fire with fire? For power purposes, yes, they should. For principle purposes, no, they shouldn't. Partisan redistricting erodes democracy from within. If redistricting is on Donald Trump's whim or anyone else's whim, we're going to have redistricting fights nonstop. This could be another relentless, nonstop political battle that we're constantly dealing with. If redistricting becomes a hyper-partisan zero-sum game, there will be some really long-term consequences of this, and these are serious because our democracy is at stake. First, we will have fewer competitive elections. Right now, on the congressional level, only about 90% of our races are already non-competitive, meaning that they're decided in the primary due to safe red and safe blue states. Gerrymandering only makes this worse because we're packing districts to engineer results before the voters get to decide, and voters then have fewer choices. Safe seats also means more extremism because the threat for a politician only comes from their partisan left or right, usually from the ideological fringe. And so politicians cater to their bases and don't seek for they don't seek bipartisan solutions. We also have weakened trust in institutions. If politicians choose their voters rather than vice versa, we're going to have less faith in our democracy. And there's already a growing anti-democratic sentiment as people feel like the chips are stacked against them, that conspiracies are prevalent, and that the government is rigged against the people. We're going to continue to have gridlock and dysfunction on the congressional level. Polarized gerrymandered districts means that we're going to have polarized government. And with a polarized government, that means chronic gridlock, government shutdowns, and an inability to solve big problems for the American people. Gerrymandering also tends to dilute the power of Black, Latino, and minority communities historically. Rural areas, by contrast, tend historically to have outsized representation when gerrymandering is extreme. So it's a big question how Democrats should fight what is a really unfair move by the Trump administration. How do we respond when government norms are broken down time and time again? Do we stick to our principles or do we fight fire with fire?